Well, hello everyone. My name is Leon Capetas, and I'm going to be your moderator today. This is the second webinar speaker series on nature restoration law for urban environments. Today we have a few speakers that Heather Brooks from Eurocities will be presenting. Before we start, I would like to introduce some house rules. Let's keep our microphones off. You can use the chat to introduce yourselves, ask your questions. You're more than welcome to do that, particularly as we have, in the end, we have part of this webinar is open to your questions, and our speakers here today will be able to give the best answers they can. The session will be recorded, so we just want to make sure that everyone is okay with that. If not, please let us know. And with this now, I'd like to pass it to my colleague Heather to introduce the session.
Thanks, Leon. Yeah, hi. Hi, everyone. This is the second webinar, welcome, in our Nature Restoration Law webinar series. So we are running from March until June. We're running this webinar series to support cities with the implementation of the Nature Restoration Law, specifically focused on the Urban Ecosystem Restoration Article. So that's Article 8. A quick reminder for those of you that weren't in our first webinar, that's no net loss of urban green space or tree canopy cover in urban ecosystem areas by 2030. So we're running this series because essentially this article now means that cities need to rethink urban planning. So they're going to have to rethink a number of different things. First of all, they need to understand the baselines and the data that's going to be used for urban green space and urban tree canopy cover. So how do you map and monitor this? We covered that in our first webinar. They need to think and update maybe municipal roadmaps, urban plans. We'll cover that in this webinar, and we'll hear a little bit more about what this webinar is going to cover in a moment. But cities also need to think about building and spatial regulations, so potentially new policies for new developments and policies for retrofitting existing buildings, so thinking about green roofs, green walls. They're going to have to think about citizen-owned land. In Brussels, for example, 50% of the green space in the city is privately owned. So cities are going to have to think about how they can work with citizens. Also, how can they work with business, potentially to think of incentives and or targets for business. Incentives maybe for offsetting and involving business in offsetting lost green space. And then they're going to have to think about the national restoration plans. So these are the plans that member states will be developing under the Nature Restoration Law. So how will cities need to get involved? What's their role? And how can they work with national government? Now, all of these things we have and will cover within this series. So if you missed the first webinar, you can catch up with the recording, but I'm going to give a very quick overview now. So in our first webinar a couple of weeks ago, we looked at that first question around the baselines and the data for urban green space and tree canopy cover. We looked into some of the definitions that cities need to be aware of. So there was this first definition around the urban ecosystem area. What does that mean? Essentially, it can either be the local administrative unit, so the boundary of your city, or it can be parts of the city. So that's the most dense part of your city, the urban centre and urban cluster. We then looked into the data sets that will be used for the actual the national restoration plans that will be submitted in 2026, the draft versions. So we looked at the data. We saw that for urban centre, urban cluster, we know this data comes from Eurostat, and that the baseline reference will be 2021. We looked at urban green space and urban tree canopy cover, and the two data sets there. So there's a new data set coming out from the Copernicus EU satellite data. So this is CLC plus backbone, and the reference year will be 2023. That should become available at some point within the next month or so. So we haven't got that data yet, but it will be available soon. And then we looked at the data also for tree canopy cover. So this is coming again from the EU satellite data, and the baseline there is also 2023. There were quite a few questions that were raised and are still to be answered. So this was particularly around the issue of how do you combine data? How can you use supplementary data? For example, if local level data is more accurate, how could we supplement this EU satellite data with local level data? How often would that data need to be updated? Of course, it can't just be a one-off because we're talking about monitoring progress over time. So we'll need to think about this data and the regularity in which that data is updated. And how can we address then the lack of quality in urban targets? These are some of the ongoing questions that need to be considered. These are questions that we raised with the European Commission and with the JRC in that first webinar. And we'll come back to these questions, I'm sure, throughout the webinar series and continue there. So moving on to our second webinar in these series then, what are we going to talk about today? Today we are focused on how to develop a municipal roadmap for nature restoration. So we're going to cover 3 key points. How can your city plan for urban ecosystem restoration? Here we have Philip Lahale-Walter, Head of Biodiversity and Nature-Based Solutions at ICLEI. He's going to share with us some of the work that they have in terms of the urban nature plans through an Urban Nature Plan Plus project and a couple other projects potentially too. Then we're going to think about what is needed in the short term and in the long term. So we're going to hear from Victoria Garcia from the Fundación Biodiversidad about what's going on there. And finally, we've got a couple of examples coming from 2 of our cities. So how are cities working on this already? We're going to hear from Tara Soderman, Director of Environment at the city of Espoo, and also from Albin Hunia, Senior Policy Advisor at the city of Utrecht. So we've got plenty to get through today. And Leon Capetas is going to be moderating this webinar, taking us through these questions in a moment. Before we jump into this then, I'm going to hand over to Leon to talk to us a bit about some of the survey results that we have run recently. So to explore a bit, how can we map and monitor urban nature plans? Over to you, Leon.
I need to unmute myself first. Thank you, Heather. Before we proceed to the presentations, we thought it would be useful to show you the results of a survey we run through the Greening Cities Partnership. Many of the cities that are here today possibly have answered the survey. So we want to show you what results we got. 89 municipalities from 11 countries answered to our survey. Specifically, the scope and the objectives focused on assessing the current status and capacities on cities to plan, develop, and monitor an urban nature plan, to gather examples of local strategies that cities have, some success stories, and the challenges they face, and then finally use these outcomes to inform policy and support structures for the urban agenda for the EU. So the survey, well, I'll skip this bit, just to say here that 29 cities out of the 89 said they already have an urban nature plan. 45 said that they're developing one. So that's almost 75% will have an urban nature plan, which is a great number. Some answered that they're not sure whether they have one, and others that they don't plan to develop one. The reason is not that they're not interested, but as we will see in a bit, that they might have some similar strategies, or they might feel that there's an overlap with other programs, or there are some financial limitations. So barriers to developing UNP refer to insufficient financial resources, limited institutional capacity and ability to coordinate, some territorial complexity. So who's responsible within the broader urban cluster, the region? So that's a challenge for 15% of the cities. Perceived redundancy. So if you have a similar plan, why develop a new one? And some other more unspecified barriers that were mentioned. So I think we covered this, whether they have or they don't have a related strategy. Some call it a green infrastructure and biodiversity plan. Others have included an urban nature strategy within their climate adaptation and resilience strategy. There is a connection with integrated urban planning approaches, with participatory and place-based projects, but these are a little bit different in nature. Then we asked them, who monitors urban green space changes and urban tree canopy cover changes over time? The majority of cities mentioned that they do monitor urban green space. Some only monitor urban tree canopy, but the majority monitor both. Well, not the majority, but many of them, like 25%. Then they also suggested what measures, how do they measure indicators? Everybody's using GIS tools to some level or another, even if they didn't mention, we know that. Remote sensing techniques, tree inventories, some cities have developed. So these are, let's say, local data that can complement what the NRR refers to in Article 8 and develop more holistic urban nature plans, some management softwares, citizen science, and then they also mentioned collaboration with experts and academia to develop, to measure these indicators. They also refer to the different categories of indicators for an urban nature plan: biodiversity and species monitoring, renaturation and restoration, tree canopy and coverage, green area per capita. That's an interesting indicator on which both Tarja and Albin will talk to us about in a bit. Air and water quality, adaptation to climate, soil and land use, connectivity and ecological networks, and finally, mitigation, climate change mitigation through carbon sequestration. And here we have a list of some additional suggested indicators. I'm not going to go through them as there are just too many, but you will have access to this publication, to this presentation, and you'll be able to go through them later on your own. And finally, the challenges that they faced: lack of financial resources, lack of technical staff, knowledge and skill issues, and lack of local political commitment, which is of major importance, as Philippe will tell us in a bit. So some key findings: yes, UNPs are expanding. There is a strong strategy backbone in our cities. There is innovative local action taking place. They have diverse initiatives. There are often multi-thematic projects that are brought together through urban nature plans. And there is some varying ability to monitor progress, as we saw, but cities use a diversity of tools. They also mentioned that there is a link to multiple other thematic priorities: biodiversity, climate resilience, air and water quality improvements, and so on. So I think I'll pass it on to our first speaker with this. Philippe, the floor is yours. Please feel free to take control of the slides, if it works.
Yes, thank you very much, Leon. And thanks so much, Heather, for putting this great webinar together and for the opportunity here to present a couple projects and maybe some background about the urban nature plans in general for those of you who haven't seen it before. Real quick about ICLEI, in case you're not familiar with us, we're a global cities network and work not only with cities, but also with other local and subnational governments. We have a wide range and impact across the world, as you can see here, having offices on all the major continents. So we're using a lot of leverage here to push urban greening in Europe as well. We work along 5 ICLEI pathways, and as you can imagine, the nature-based development pathways is the most relevant in the topic that we're talking about today.
Philippe, to interrupt you,
Yes.
I think, have you moved to the next slide?
I thought I did, yes.
Yeah, no, I think you need to press the button on top which says take control. Because right now you're shifting only for yourself. Now it works.
That makes sense.
Okay, excellent.
Do you see now the next slide?
We see about ICLEI right now.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Perfect. Apologies for that. Yeah, as I said, we're a global network. I'm not going to repeat all of that, but as you can see, we have a wide range here of impact across the world, and using that in order to drive, in this case, nature-based solutions forward, and having many cities here work with us in Europe on furthering urban greening through the urban nature plans. We work, especially my team, on biodiversity and NBS, work on a wide range of different projects, and I just wanted to highlight two of them today. You can see the circled ones here are the Urban Nature Plans Plus, and this is really what my main input is about. And then also Network Nature. I'm going to say a few words at the end, just because it's a great resource for everyone. Maybe real quick as a background, and Heather knows this very well, a couple of years ago, we engaged with the European Commission in a contract in which we organized an extensive consultation process that was both written, but also with in the form of many different consultation webinars where we gathered input from a lot of cities. You can see it here on the map, well distributed all across Europe, where we got feedback from, also well distributed across the different regions of Europe. So I think a pretty nicely representative range of feedbacks that we got. And this consultation process was really in order to define what should urban nature plans really be about. You remember urban nature plans are mentioned in the biodiversity strategy, and the Commission had this contract with us in order to define how should it actually look like, and what concept should define what an urban nature plan is, and what are the steps for a city to gather it. So just for you to see all the good input that we received in those workshops that we organized with the cities, just some slides or some screenshots here. And eventually, this is what we ended up with. Most of you might be familiar now with the steps of the urban nature plans methodology, the different phases of preparation, action planning, and then implementation and monitoring, which we will go more into detail in other webinars as well. Alongside with this, under the leadership of Heather and EuroCities, a toolkit was organized and developed that supported every one of these steps that I just showed here. So every one of these steps has multiple different tools that cities can use, and it is my understanding that this toolkit will still be published by the Commission soon. Now, I already mentioned UNP Plus, standing for Urban Nature Plan Plus. That is a project that ICLEI has been involved in now for, I think, about 2 years. And it really is about now taking that concept I just showed that we developed and improving it, testing it in cities, and creating a next generation urban nature plan framework. The intention is to have it forward-looking and systemically integrated, so integrated with what is already existing in the cities, not to duplicate anything, and have an inclusive planning instrument that is also just. Now, the project is has different activities. One is, as I mentioned, the testing, assessing, and ultimately improving the UNP framework, which you can see here on the very left. But then there is also extensive peer-to-peer and reflexive monitoring across the cities to exchange on what has worked, what are success stories, what are lessons learned. Then here in the middle, you see that justice and equity is really a big focus of that project because it hasn't been that much of a focus in the original concept. Then here, the second one from the right is on public-private partnership. So there is a finance aspect and including the private sector factor in this project. And then here on the very right, eventually, we are aiming to create and to test new planning and evaluation tools that hopefully make the life of cities and the technicians working on urban nature plans more easy and simple and effective. There are different kind of steps in the project. Again, here the actual mission is to develop thriving biodiverse cities across Europe with green spaces that are accessible to all. So you see that justice component here again. Then the approach is really to integrate city-led initiatives into national sustainability strategy. So you can also see there's now the different levels included in the effort. And then the different steps is through knowledge creation, developing scaling mechanisms that allows us and cities to scale it up and out and deep, depending on the different objectives. Then this will be tested by the lighthouse cities, as they are called here in the UNP Plus project, which is Paris and Barcelona, really champions of urban greening. And then the greening cities, Burgas, Belgrade, and Mannheim, are really the ones that then look into how can this be replicated and upscaled. Now, what does the plus stand for? UNP is for urban nature plans, but the plus really is, and I touched on this before, promoting the existing process, since it's not that well known yet among cities in Europe, but also to promote integration strategies, how to integrate UNP, urban nature plans, really with your existing policies and frameworks, and also how to integrate it vertically with other levels of policy, maybe regional or national. Develop further tools, I mentioned that before. Co-creation is really at the core of the initial concept of the urban nature plans already. But really extending this now to overcoming departmental silos is what we hear over and over again from cities is often an issue. They do not work with other departments that are highly relevant to urban greening and urban nature. Yeah, and then I mentioned the cross-level approach here as well is a focus of UNP Plus. Now, I do want to mention one more project that has just started, and that is Commit to Green. It utilizes a cross-scalar approach. So here, that going on different levels is really at the center of the project, and the project will build on the UNP Plus frameworks and outcomes by creating urban nature plan guidelines for the 8 pilot cities involved in Commit to Green. And each pilot city will co-design and implement cross-scalar participatory greening and renaturing strategies at the community level, which is really interesting. It goes, again, on different levels than what has been done so far in these projects. The cities serve as pilot cities for testing and scaling effective approaches, kind of similar to UNP Plus, and the project connects the district level initiatives with broader urban strategies, ensuring that green interventions contribute to the long-term ecological connectivity and integrated urban planning. I'll leave it at that. You can see the different cities involved here in that project here in the slide, and I'm happy to post some links here in the chat in just a minute. And I'm almost done. The kind of last slide I want to show is on network nature. This is probably our most important project in our project portfolio. It is the project in Europe that really funnels all the good knowledge and outcomes of, I think right now we're over 120 NBS projects that are financed by the EU to create cutting-edge new knowledge that mainstreams biodiversity and nature-based solutions. And all that is supposed to go into Network Nature as the one-stop shop for the different target groups and target audiences of Network Nature. You can see there's heaps of material here for local and subnational governments like you, but there's also a lot of really good stuff on there for investors and entrepreneurs. It has a big focus on the private sector, which is amazing because we have that funding gap that we want to address. And then also policymakers will find heaps of policy information, policy briefs, position papers, guidelines, background information, data in case you need arguments for new policies that promote NBS. You can find that very easily on Network Nature. And then not the least here, educators are one focus of the project. We do want to mainstream nature-based solutions and biodiversity also among young people and the people that learn. So a lot of material here for teachers and professors as well. And with that, I'll leave it at that. I'm very happy to connect. I'll put my my information in the chat and also some links to those projects I just presented. Thanks a lot, Leon.
Same again. Thank you, Philippe. That's a great presentation. And yes, please ask questions in the chat to Philippe. At the end of the four presentations, we will have a question and answer session. So we'll keep track of what you're posting on the chat. And yes, do visit Network Nature, Urban Nature Plus web pages, Commit to Green, which also started recently. With this, I'd like to move to our next speaker, Victoria Perez from Fundación Biodiversidad from Spain. Fundación Biodiversidad practically works with cities and works with the Ministry of Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge in Spain. So they're very well placed to give guidance to cities. So there is let's say, a uniform and high-level coordination of urban nature plans in Spain. So while later we'll hear the experience from cities, here we're very interested to hear how government supports cities in developing such plans and projects. I'll pass it on to you, Victoria.
Okay.
Looking forward to your intervention.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Good morning, everyone. My name is Victoria. As you said, as Leon said, I'm the cities area coordinator in Fundación Biodiversidad in Spain. In these 10 minutes, 12 maybe, I would talk about how we boost urban plans and restoration in our calls for grants and the key questions about our guidance for measuring and monitoring indicators for renaturalization and resilience projects. Just to provide you some context about who we are, Fundación Biodiversidad is a public foundation that belongs to the ministry, as Leon said, and in Spain. And our main mission is the conservation and restoration of nature on different levels to preserve ecosystems in good shape and restore those degraded, and to halt the drivers of degradation and promote a sustainable use of biodiversity. we can do it alone. So we join forces to different stakeholders like public and private sectors, academia and civil society through calls for grants mainly, and by executing our own projects. We work with city councils in three main lines of work: renaturalization and urban resilience, bioeconomy and rural environments, and green jobs and capacity building. In concrete, in naturalization and urban resilience, we launched almost 200 million euros for cities with more than 50,000 inhabitants, with an expected outcome to increase green and blue infrastructure and implementation of nature-based solutions for the improvement of biodiversity and quality of life, including health and adaptation to climate change. 73 projects are right now executing actions till December 2025. So from that moment on, we will be able to know how these renaturalization projects have impacted territories. What are we looking for? These are some of the requirements that we introduce in our calls. Participation of research centers and non-profit organizations is allowed, so they can apply together to our calls. Citizen participation and communication activities are required through specific plans. And city strategies on green infrastructure and biodiversity are funded if cities do not already have them. What do we expect from these projects? Obviously, it is very much related to the keys that defined urban renaturalization. Taking into account this framework I spoke before, we expect them to have green strategies that are implemented through nature-based solutions that promote and are based on alliances that involve all the sectors and that respond to the challenges of the climate change. In short, the projects implemented under these calls for grants must have, and in fact they have, a nature-based solution approach. On one hand, it is necessary to base the actions on the ground in strategic instruments. Local strategies or plans on urban naturalization is very important. These plans will include a diagnosis about the state of conservation of the city and will provide information about the problems and opportunities of the territory. There is as well another mandatory for all projects is to design a governance and participation plan, and also a communication and awareness plan. The last mandatory, but not less important, is to develop an indicator, measurement, and monitoring plan. We promote strategic instruments with a double function: to give a consistent framework to the proposed actions in the project, and to direct actions to strengthen and improve urban green infrastructure, similar to the urban nature plan. And these are the elements of a strategic or a plan that, in our opinion, are the most value to be contained in this document. We identify some of them as basic elements, like a multi-scale diagnosis of the green infrastructure, habitats and flora and fauna, GIS mapping and analysis, including an analysis of connectivity, climate change risks and opportunities, and finally, lines and actions for the management and the improvement of green infrastructure. Some cities complete this plan with another important elements that in any case are desirable in the medium term: inventory of trees, quantification of the ecosystem services on green infrastructure, a study of compatibility with urban planning, establishing the principles of ecological maintenance to ensure the improvement of biodiversity will be kept in the future. Here is an example of one of our projects in Pamplona, in the north of Spain. The objective of the project is to integrate its rivers as main elements of their green and blue urban infrastructure. They not only have developed a strategy, but also have included a drainage strategy that avoids the overflowing of the rainwater network, managing rainwater from its source. It performs a multi-scale analysis as shown in the image. On the left, an identification of core areas and proposal of green corridors with ecological functionality. On the right, specific location of green infrastructure elements, their functionality and improvements through pilot actions. No. Okay. Here is another example of one of our projects in Granollers, in the northeast of Spain. The objective is quite the same, to integrate its river as main elements of the infrastructure. But in this case, they want to reduce motorized traffic in the part of the city to free up space for naturation. It performs a multi-scale analysis as shown in the image on the left, identifying the elements of the green infrastructure. On the right, analyzing the potential ecological connection with the natural environment. And below, they are making a pilot study in the neighborhood of the city, street by street, identifying its problems and the capacity to accommodate more trees. Let's get through our guidance for measuring and monitoring indicators for naturalization and resilience projects in Spanish cities. In this link in our website, you can download it. This is a reviewed version of the previous one that maybe you know, for our new call for naturalization projects financed by European Regional Development Funds. Many time in thinking about the best indicator, the best methodology, it doesn't mean that it is the best guide, of course, but I think it fulfills its mission to help local entities to focus on data standardization that provide evidence about naturalization impact. Some problems with the slide. Right. Okay. This document, this guidance, includes 7 thematic areas where you can find main indicators and a set of supplementary ones, allowing cities to tailor the assessment of urban nature plans to local context, wishes, and needs. But we don't have time to go into these indicators more deeply, but you will keep this slide on the presentations for more information. But let me give you 2 examples about how cartographic representation allows us to make eco-spatial analysis to measure the benefits of naturalization. In this example, you can see how the location of the potential trees that will be gained with the naturation allows us to visualize the tree cover and calculate its benefits, such as the increase of shade, so that we can also contribute to the urban tree cover included in the National Nature Restoration Plan. In this other example, in this map of proximity to green areas for public use, especially how next or far away is a green area from people. The spatial analysis of these indicators allows to advance in green equity in city and to identify spaces with green deficiencies, including vulnerable populations. On the map, we can see the simultaneous proximity to various types of green areas. And that's all from my side. Thank you so much for your attention, and I remain at your disposal for any question.
Great. Thank you, Victoria. That was really interesting. In particular, I would also like to recommend that people visit and download the guide on monitoring of the indicators. It's really helpful. I know it's in Spanish. I see in the comments here that it's not been translated to English yet. Maybe some online tools can help with the translation. I know they can. I have a couple of questions for you, Victoria, if you can answer. The first one is relating to the fact that you have developed some strategies now, but it takes some time to see impact. What is next for Fundación Biodiversidad?
Yeah, our projects will finish at the end of this year, so till next year we won't have results yet. So right now we have our first strategies, our first mapping, and we will have to be some patient, because till the end of the next year we won't have the results of a global impact in renaturalization. We will develop. We will monitoring those indicators maybe 2 years from now. So we will be able to have the impact of those projects maybe in 2 years.
Excellent. Great. One aspect of your indicators there that I found particularly interesting is that you're not only talking about accessibility to green space, which you can kind of map with tools, GIS tools. You're also looking at perception of space. So this requires different skills, other methods from the social sciences as well.
What is the question? Sorry.
So the question is, how do you engage social scientists as well in your analysis of perception of space, and how that can help improve what citizens need?
Encuestas a pie de calle, survivors.
Yeah, Nuria is here with me, which is from our teams, so he's telling me some things. Yeah, we have, as I said, a participation plan. So cities should have a participation plan to hear what the citizens have to say about this project. And it is very good to, from the beginning, to design this project by hearing what the citizens have to say. About scientifics, it's very, very important that they take part from this project, so they can go together to the project to integrate that vision in this project. So one of the tools that our cities are using is a survey, so they can ask what they expect from a project like that, and include all the results in the design of the project.
That's excellent. Great, thank you. And one final question: do you want to say a few things about our previous discussion that you're setting up a learning community?
Yeah.
On urban nature plans?
Yeah, we will launch in a few months a learning and knowledge community to promote the meeting and collaboration between the different agents active in urban and in renaturalization, and to exchange experiences. So we will be able to have some repository of the items that maybe concern cities the most, and we will be able to have some documents maybe I can share with you in the future. And we would like to exchange experiences as well, to what they concern about solutions, nature-based solutions, or other tools that they can share with us. I think it would be very interesting because it's a quite demand about our cities to take that space of talking to each other and to share all the difficulties, technical difficulties, and maybe some therapy as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And please take advantage of the Greening Cities Partnership, the network Nature, connect with us to help with this learning and knowledge community and dissemination work you're doing. I'll move on to our next speaker, and I'll give you the floor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Albin Hunia. I probably met quite a few of you already in the last year. I'm from the municipality of Utrecht, a place rather central in the Netherlands that I suppose even many of you have visited. As Tarja already mentioned, Espoo is a green city. I think we are among the moderately green cities. Let me take control of the presentation if that works.
Yes, sorry I didn't introduce you, but you did yourself.
Yeah, no problem, Leon. We're improvising. Pieces of the green puzzle. My colleagues have been working on greening the city of Utrecht for over 20 years. So I think we have experience. We have collected these green puzzle pieces and are sort of on the brink of becoming this nature inclusive city. But let me not pretend to really present you the ultimate roadmap for greening cities in Europe. We can only present you some of the green puzzle pieces, some of the indicators, but we don't have a real urban nature plan yet. But let's not be too modest. I think we are on our way, but we need a green leap to move on. Let me see if this is working. Yeah. You see this, huh? Netherlands, fourth city of the Utrecht, fourth city of the Netherlands. I think it's about the same size as Espoo, with a little over 350,000 inhabitants. And it's an old city. It dates from pre-Roman times. The Roman Empire sort of ended in Utrecht, and so you can trace back the city to that period. It's also a modern city with a knowledge economy and infrastructure that allows for growth, and it has a rather progressive city council. But we need all that because it's also a fast-growing city and it's a green city. So we have a good starting point, but having a good starting point also brings it risks. Because apart from the old town center, we have on the picture to the left these typical expansion bursts in the history of the town, where around the last turn of the century, and then in the 1930s, and then after the Second World War, large lobes of the city grew, and it doubled in size in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So we have large expansion, and to the right you see example, not only expansion is going on, now we're looking at densification of a city. But even in these old areas that expanded in the 60s and the 70s, these typical areas were laid out with a lot of green. Utrecht actually is really a green city at some point, really to the point of 75 square meters of green per household. And in the quiet areas, so some of the green is neatly mown, short grass, trimmed trees, nice looking, well kept. That's how many people like their green in a city. It needs to be tidy. It needs to be maintained. But some of the green at the edges really works as biodiversity hotspots and wildlife corridors. But towards the center, towards the older areas of the city, where some parts are refurbished with train infrastructure, new housing, we see where greening really starts getting tough. Too much pavement. And of course, since automobility came into our towns about 100 years ago, the car has become such a central taker of space that this is the real challenge for greening our cities. our city council is really thriving for healthy urban living for all. So there's the justice part incorporated in all the city policies. Green and climate adaptation, in a changing climate, hotter summers, wetter winters, green takes a central role, but green is not just for biodiversity. Obviously, green is something that invites people to go outside, enjoy nature, feel better. The map to the right, however, shows the differences that you will find in neighborhoods in every larger city. The blue areas show approximately 10 years lower life expectancy than the orange areas. That is something to invest in. Invest in behind doors, investing in economic, social, but also investing in terms of the public areas. And of course, that's what me and my team are most focused on. So if I'm talking about green in the city, it will be mostly about public green. Making healthy urban living for all requires a huge investment as it is. You saw these stony streets, but we are looking forward at inviting another 100,000 inhabitants in our city of Utrecht, some 40,000 households. If we want to keep the city as green as it is, well, I might say as it was, we need to create about 440 hectares of new green and plant thousands of trees. Well, that's the challenge. But as I said, we don't come from nothing. We don't work in a vacuum. It's about almost 20 years ago now, 2007, the Green Structure Plan already laid the foundation for the green city of Utrecht. It focused mainly on designation of existing green. Where is the green in the city? How is this connecting green areas? How will it structure new green? So how will it influence decisions on projects and developing the city? But it's not just about green in terms of biodiversity. It's also about connecting the city in terms of making healthy landscape for people, for cultural heritage. And newly in its update from 2018, it also incorporates climate adaptation aspect. So the Green Structure Plan is very much about structuring green. That was complemented by the Spatial Strategy Utrecht, which is a vision for 2040, looking forward. How do you create a city that combines a lot of functions, and it's a fast-growing city? It's about expanding a city. It's about densifying a city. It's about combining all the functions of a city. I will talk about that in a few minutes more. But the 10-minute city, making sure that everyone is able to reach all these functions within 10 minutes from their homes, has become essential to this part. And although this is an elaboration of structuring the city, I feel that the spatial strategy of Utrecht is very much about defining quantity, including quantity of green. And now the third one is about species, the Utrecht species list. Yeah, it is policy, and then it's not. But at least it guides the way for protecting species that are typical and valuable for Utrecht. A subset of these species is actually guiding development. New development projects take into account the life cycles of house sparrows, swifts, and some of the bat species. And a subset of this species list is also used to keep a finger on the pulse of how biodiversity is actually doing. So the Utrecht list is a list of species. Is actually a nice step forward to not just look at structure and quantity, but the Utrecht species list is about quality of green in the city. How many minutes do I have left, Leon?
You have a bit of time. That's fine.
Okay. So the spatial strategy of Utrecht looking forward to 2040 uses a bar code of functions. If this city really wants to grow and improve on quality, it's a sort of wish list of all the functions that a city needs to perform for people and biodiversity. It doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. If you want to have housing, if you want to have recreational areas, if you want to have biodiversity, if you want to have economy, it doesn't fit. So making the barcode intelligent is finding ways of combining functions of the city. And this has been laid out in this spatial strategy document. And of course, we are talking about greening. One of the, I think the big pluses of this vision for the city of Utrecht in 2040 is that it defines green at 5 different levels, scales levels. So you, on the number 1 greening street, you step out your house. How do you experience green? Going from park areas, blue-green connections, green corridors to the green around the city. And I talked about the 10-minute city. This green around the city should be able to be reached by bicycle, obviously, in 10 minutes. So this is all within reach. So I think the big plus of the spatial strategy helps us talk about green on different levels. 2040, 450 hectares. We are looking at spending 1.6 billion on green alone. Not something that if you have it on your bank account, you can just spend. You need to make work with work. The moment you start putting a shovel in the ground for whatever project, you have to make sure that green also gets its place. But obviously, we don't have 1.6 billion on our bank account, so we do need to find additional funding for realizing this ambition. And the other thing is, if you look at the planning, we need to speed up. Traditional planning won't help us. We need to speed up greening on all these levels, from greening streets to creating parks and corridors to actually greening the areas around the city. This is being elaborated now, but it's still very much a challenge. Again, spatial strategy Utrecht really provided us with some household indicators for green. 75 square meters of green per household really is a good way of thinking about satisfying levels of green for a city. But that's an overall number. Some of those 75 meters will end up at the edge of town, hopefully within 10 minutes of bicycling from your house. But if on a hot day, you need to find 40% of green in every neighborhood. So by the end of the street, you need to find a park that provides shade. And there is a maximum distance of green for playing, relaxing, going out, moving in the outside, and of course, not last but not least, experiencing nature. Because we tend to very much speak about green in terms of quantity. We need square meters, we need to plant trees, but everyone you speak about nature in town will say, yeah, there used to be so many more butterflies when I was young. Where are all the butterflies? So if we forget about the quality of green, we have greened our cities, but we have lost biodiversity. So we are really at the point of transitioning our towns, and it's quite a challenge. Yeah? We are in the middle of an energy transition. We are in the middle of a mobility transition. Climate change is upon us, and we say that greening is part of the solutions for adapting to and making our resilient cities of the future. But I think we're really at the start of a transition. And we have the examples. Everyone who's been in Utrecht has seen the Catharijnensingel, where an old highway has changed into a beautiful green canal. We have little squares in old stony neighborhoods that have become green. We have planted edible forests, tiny forests. We have planted little trees on viaducts for cyclists and people that walk. But these are all still pieces of the puzzle. And I don't feel that we're really in transition yet towards this, what shall we call, nature inclusive city. A a couple of points for urban nature plans that I feel are essential and that we have partly covered, but partly haven't. 5 points here. Protecting existing biodiversity. That feels like a basic thing. But in the midst of energy transition, where we are isolating our houses, it's a huge challenge to actually keep the animals that live in buildings like bats and swifts. We are very much at the risk of losing them. Transforming existing green and blue towards more biodiverse green. Actually, that is working rather well. Key here is maintenance. If you go from neatly mown lawns towards biodiverse meadows, just by changing the maintenance in town, there's a huge opportunity for transforming hectares of existing public green. The third one, greening the existing city. Well, that is the big challenge. The pavement, of course, is the big thing that needs to be removed. But this is where mobility plays a central part. We have, beyond the front doors of our houses, mobility is key. That's how we created our city. So mobility is the key to changing and greening our city. But planting trees is the other challenge. We don't have enough space for trees. We want those 60,000 trees, but every time we want to put one in the ground, there's a huge discussion with maintenance and, well, sheer space. We don't have the time now to discuss all that, I'm afraid. Development by densification. So we stack a whole lot of functions, including houses, apartments, on top of each other, on brownfields and former industrial areas, which is beautiful, really transforming areas. But obviously, we're not going to find, if you are really talking about combining functions, you're not going to find all the square meters for green, let alone square meters for true biodiverse green. So crucial here is creating areas from the go that are nature inclusive, quality green on the ground and nature inclusive buildings going up. And then the last one, development by expansion, is some other challenge, because that feels like traditional urbanism. You plan ahead for mobility, for housing, and for green. But if you really want to go for satisfying levels of green, you cannot take green as an afterthought. You really have to invest in enough levels of green for these resilient levels of the future, cities of the future, because you cannot repair. You have to do it right away from the start and find the funds for that. So a couple of takeaways, Leon. I hope I'm not going over time. I think the approach that Utrecht took in the last 20 years by making policy plans for structure, quantity, and quality, I think that really works. But if you create these documents, you have to give it teeth. If you say the structure of our green looks like this, it has to have stronger spatial planning consequences than it has now. If you say we need quantity, 75 square meters per household, 404, you need to really ensure that the mechanisms for achieving quantity are there. Oh yes, and quality. Where are the butterflies at the end of the road? So making green is not enough. You have to understand the life cycles of the biodiversity that you're serving with all these initiatives, and take the consequences. 3 points more. Structural space for greening. If you design densification projects, if you design expansion projects, don't use green, don't implement green as an afterthought. You have to find the space. Something needs to move. And in terms of moving, I think mobility is of course key. We need to restructure our cities around people and nature, because those are connected. And some of the mobility choices that we made 100 years ago, they need to change. Structural funds for greening. If we say green cannot be an afterthought because it serves so many things, healthy cities, climate adaptive cities, we cannot repair. We need to find the funds from the start. And the last but not least, we have to do nature inclusive development. As I said, quality of nature requires really understanding what the life cycles is that we want to support. Just planting trees is not enough. You only get a singing bird when you exit your house if you understand why that bird can actually live in your street. Thank you very much. I think there's room for questions, and otherwise email me. Yeah.
Great. Congratulations. I see some people clapping. This was a really excellent presentation. I also made some notes that some points that I find particularly unique and interesting. That this strategy is looking at 2040. It's not just for the next couple of years. It's not just an operational plan. And it is connected to an investment plan. So you know how much it will cost you, and you need to make arrangements for that. What I found interesting is also your focus on quality, not just quantity, particularly as you're densifying the city. And the fact also that you are connecting with other spatial planning instruments, which many cities in the survey identified as a challenge. And also Philippe mentioned as being one of the critical success points for urban nature plans. And yeah, your statement that green is not an afterthought, I think that encapsulates the whole message here. Thanks again. Don't know if you have a comment here on quality. Do you think that considering densification, the focus on quality becomes even more important?
Yeah, I think that even becomes more important, because what we really need to understand is that we urban nature is not something that just creeps in. I think so many cities in the end look alike. The way we build and the way we structure our mobility and green around it, that there is something like typical urban nature, even between Barcelona and Espoo and Amsterdam. There's something typical about this. And in terms of really understanding urban nature, I think we need to take one step further, and that is including the built environment. We have these sparrows not because we just have a park. They need a park as well, but they need also a place to nest, which used to be a broken tile in the roof where they nest. If we repair the house, where is the sparrow going to nest? That's a question that we need to address for the future.
Excellent point. So greening is not the work of engineers alone. It's the work mostly of ecologists, urban ecologists.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Albin. I think it's a good moment to take a 5 minutes break to stretch a bit. It is 11:17. If we can come back at let's say 11:22 and see if Tarja can connect to have our final presentation, and then open it to you. Please feel free to include comments in the chat. Everybody's reading it. We'll go back to these questions and comments at the end of all our presentations. So 5 minutes break, and see you in a bit. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you managed to make a coffee and are back here. Let's try again. Tarja, if you're here to connect. I don't know if you can hear me. Great.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let's give it a go. If you want to, so I don't know if you have control of the slides or Harris.
Yes, I have now.
Oh, you have it. Okay,
yes.
And we can hear you fine now.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Okay, second time. So, hello, I'm Tarja Söderman from Espoo, and I'm showing you how we made a roadmap for urban nature in Espoo. doesn't seem to change. Okay.
It had now. Looks
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Challenge is how to grow and stay green when you are already quite green. So we have a lot of green areas, but we grow a lot and already have strictly protected nature areas as well, quite a lot. And what I'm covering in this preparation is showing our journey of preparing and implementing this no net loss of biodiversity roadmap for the city of Espoo. And then I take one example of its measures concerning ecological restoration. And I'm concluding with political and managerial contexts. What factors contribute success in developing that kind of municipal roadmap to halt biodiversity loss? And what was our goal? Is to safeguard biodiversity, and our city strategy, Espoo story, as we call it, for this council season for 21 to 25, set an objective to prepare such a roadmap that biodiversity can recover and we can achieve no net loss of biodiversity by 2035. And to use kind of best possible practices, what we have, and also prepare for changes in EU level and national legislation. So we need there is new nature legislation coming. And also taking everybody on board, so encouraging the entire Espoo community to act for biodiversity. So this is not just a document. It's more than a document. It's an ongoing process from here during the preparation and until 2035. And how to take everybody on board? By discussing, by structuring further, what is the roadmap? What is the nature? What is the goal? And we took kind of 4 different steps. Goals derived from our Espoo story, which says that Espoo is pioneer, combining city and diverse nature, and how we do that. So what are our targets on the long run, and how we are going to achieve the targets by doing what? And then we took 5 kind of operating principles which take us towards 2035, and then we increased the level of concreteness. What are the big issues we need to develop further? What changes there must be? So kind of development entities, 13 large entities of the different issues. And then making it more detailed, having 17 concrete measures, what we are going to put into practice in the next council season. And here you can see them. So goals, and then the operating principles, how to achieve the goals. And they are actually quite basic. We have ecological network, which we have to enhance and promote systematically and proactively. And then there are natural habitats and species, and the state has to be improved. And especially here, where we have a lot of nature, the mitigation hierarchy is crucial. How we put it into practice in planning and all implementation. Then marine waters and fresh waters, they come already from Water Framework Directive. So what are our methods to use best possible data, best possible practices? And then coming to ecosystem services, using them sustainably and taking care of the nature that can provide them and people can value what we can get there. And then increasing understanding and knowledge of urban dwellers, what kind of nature is good for biodiversity. And then further, I'm not, here, this is one important operating principle, how we are avoiding adverse impacts on nature, how we are minimizing them and restoring nature in development areas where construction has been made and possibly compensate effects which we have created elsewhere, off-site. And then if we take it further, I'm not going to cover these in detail. You can look them further when a slide are shared, but then comes the development entities. And then the detailed measures. For example, we can have here, we are going to pilot ecological restoration on city-owned land and look at how it's go, and then perhaps make recommendation for private land owners in Espoo. Then we prepare city units, each of them kind of own toolkit for taking biodiversity into account, and then we develop and adopt further cooperation and collaboration model with residents and other communities acting in Espoo. And how we made it. It was prepared multi-professionally, so there were ecologists, engineers, architects, and so on side by side on our urban environment sector, which means everything we do in environment, housing, permitting, developing spatial plans, and so on. And we made also kind of project plan with work packages, so kind of structured approach. And I calculated we had 60 management meetings in a couple of years and numerous informal brainstorms in 22 from 25. Then we had a policymakers workshop in first months. We had a business actor group which met 3 times and involving about 15 big construction companies and other companies acting in Espoo. Then we had a follow-up group. There were all participants from central level government and authorities dealing with nature conservation, participatory workshops for key experts, and then we set up NatureWise expert network group with now there are 70 experts acting it, and it's growing. Everybody who is interested in nature issues, and we also invite researchers talking about newest development and newest research ideas. And our city government made a final decision this February, and the implementation of the roadmap is supported by a steering group. Our directors sit there, and working group, which our managers sit. And then there's this nature-wise expert network group as a part of daily leadership and expert work. And here were our work packages from our project phase, which is now behind, but you can see what we did. We had a website, put everything there. We made actually urban nature plan, but it was kind of a collecting everything we already do. And this is the next step, this roadmap. So we looked what are the practices of no-net loss and ecological compensation in other growing cities in Europe, what are the different tools. Then we looked at all the spatial information we have and our collaborators had, and nature and national level had, and we looked where is restoration potential. And we had a communication group as well. And then we had a collaboration with national level legislation, development and researchers. And finally, combined the roadmap. It should be soon the full version in English side, but I'm not sure if it's already today or week still. And then something about ecological restoration. That's one measure of the roadmap. So we actually promised in the roadmap to pilot restoration in 4 sites, but actually we are going further with 18 sites now. So we are looking forests, peatlands and small waters owned by the city of the Espoo, and spatial data was used to look what are the endangered habitat types in poor conditions, what are the habitats of endangered species, EU-directed species, and otherwise valuable species habitats in poor conditions. And then we looked about 100 sites, and then there are 18 sites already very potential, so and still tens of possibly suitable for restoration. And now we have ordered restoration surveys and restoration plans for consultant, and we get them in autumn, and then we go further. And then when we have these restored sites, they are approved by compensation register, which is maintained by a national authority, nature conservation authority, which was in one of our stakeholder groups. And they are marked so that only Espoo can use them, and other cities cannot take them in this phase. And Finnish Nature Conservation Act recommends voluntary ecological compensation. So you don't have to, but if you want. And then as a municipality, we can be a forerunner in that and test how does it work. That you first restore, and then if there is something you cannot avoid, some tricky project, then you can compensate it. And we have a very multi-level system according to our legislation, how to do that. And here you can see it. And we're going to do those restoration measures in not this spring, but next in 2026 starting, and then make these voluntary ecological compensation applications for this authority. And what's happening next? We will realize the map, invent new best practices, and make it as a normal management and leadership thing and expert thing, and then go further to our goal. So there's lots to be done, and we are starting with these 17 first measures. But of course, there's a lot of something you do in certain way now, and then you can change it to be more nature-wise, even if you build a bridge or do something which the main goal is not protect, but to build the city. And here, finally, our context, what made this possible, or that a little bit easier, was the current political commitment, a specific object to do this roadmap for this no-net loss. And of course, it was accepted by the city government. They discussed it 4 times, and 4th time they decided it. Then a strong mandate from the residents. Residents value highly. It's one reason why they moved to Espoo, and we have a lot of resident polls stating that all the time. Then we have a quite long history from 80s of nature and biodiversity programs, but this roadmap is the first one where we looked what else we have to do for nature, just only protecting nature. So how do you protect nature by doing something totally else? Data on nature, we have a very good quality data, spatial data, species, habitat types, ecological connection. We know where everything is and what happens if we do something. Then there was a multi-professional preparation process, the whole urban environment sector, and process ownership by our vice mayor. He's actually a civil servant, but so leading all these 1,300 employees. Everybody was committed, and we had a large number of discussions, and we shared everything. So everything we've written as a kind of a agreement product for this roadmap to process further was agreed by everyone who was working with this. And then everybody has also the responsibility for nature wisdom as part of daily work without any specific extra funding. So you have to change your operating procedures. Of course, when you have some special project, you can have a little bit money, but not much more. And then finally, we utilized a lot of web network of 6 biggest cities, networks in city, networks with companies, and so on, and learned from peers and others. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarja. Thank you. That was very interesting. And while you were presenting, I was constantly thinking, Espoo is like a model city. The majority of the cities cannot do this possibly. It must require a lot of financial resources. But I think it's based on your last slide. I would say that a big part of the success has not to do with financial resources. It has to do with commitment, political. It has to do with governance, the history of the city, the local context. Basically, it has to do with policies. So it is something for many cities to aspire to get where you are now. even if they don't have the resources that Espoo might have. So yeah, this is fantastic work. I also like particularly the mitigation hierarchy. It puts in very simple language and terms the priorities, how you're working. The animation also helps. It is not just beautiful, it helps relate, it helps connect with your work. And I also found your operating principles as a key way to achieve the objectives that you have. So a roadmap is not just about a plan, we will do 1, 2, 3, 4. It's about how you get there. And the operating principles are very useful. I think it'd be nice to open, we have about 10 minutes to open this to the audience. I'm sorry we didn't manage to reserve more time. But it'd be nice to take some questions. I can see already some questions posted there. One particularly for Albin. The barcode, Albin. It looks nice. I hadn't seen it before. Can you quickly say like how it's being used and whether it's many departments adopting it, or is it just a nice graphic that your department came up with?
A bit of both, of course, Leon. No, it's widely adopted in the sense that it's still used for strategic planning and for looking at the big decisions that are taken for developing larger areas. But in the end, it is about balancing all these functions that a city has to serve, and green is one of the main principles of the greening of the spatial strategy is green unless. So green is, but of course there's always excuses for not making it green because it's a strong competition for other functions as well. Yes, the barcode is used still on strategic planning level, and in the terms of reference for development projects on different scales, it is still being used. But of course, yeah, in practice it's always in hindsight how the barcode actually works out. Yeah. Especially if at some point things cost green. And then they say, "Oh, we're going to compensate it." I don't feel that we have a compensation register like Tarja just talked about for Espoo. So that's really interesting. How do you keep track of what you remove at one place and have to realize extra at some other place?
That was going to be my next question. So it's not a rhetorical. It is an actual question for you, Tarja. It's also in the chat. You mentioned the mitigation hierarchy in relation to improving biotopes. One of the aspects of this is compensation. How do you compensate, and whether there is a need to compensate within the city, basically at a specific distance, maximum distance from the site?
So how we compensate and how we match.
Yeah.
We restore as much as possible, and still it might not be enough. So there is under development kind of a nature value market in Finland, and it might happen that then we have to buy from some forest owner, for example, who is owning now kind of economically productive forest, but she or he can change the project, the maintenance system, and then they are sold in the nature value market and Espoo can buy. But of course, this is in the future. But what will now happen, that we try to renovate as much more as possible. But of course, there are competing land uses, recreational routes, new buildings, and so on. So we are in a kind of early days, but we are now looking how we can fit these together, or do we manage to avoid something? So we use the whole mitigation hierarchy palette, and then in the end, if nothing else can be done, then we compensate.
Great, thank you. There is another question for you, Tarja, like for Espoo specifically. How do you decide when nature is restored enough, and whether how do you feel you have achieved your goals? I don't know. I hope Gitti this represents what you've typed in the chat.
Yes. First one was restoring enough, never. So we restore as much as possible. And then there are a lot of discussion. Do we build? Do we have this recreation route or not? Do we have more nature? But now we have these 18, and then when they are restored, what is the next step, and so on. And how we measure our goals, we had a lot of discussion on this, that we cannot measure nature because the impacts, what we do in this council season or do not, they don't show immediately. So of course, with normal monitoring birds and mapping natural habitats and so on, what we knew normally, this continues. But we monitor this roadmap by what is done, what are the new measures, and what are what actually the departments do, and they have to report it, and they report it to our city council per year. So, and also we try to monitor the changes in normal routines as well.
Great. And one final question, possibly related to this. You've mentioned that population is growing. There is demand for people to move to Espoo because it's green, and it's a good place to live. However, that puts pressure on development. Almost looking at the map, around 2/3 of the municipal area is green. How can you accommodate this population growth that is projected?
That is a good question. So how we put them? Do we make our urban form tighter? Or higher? Or how we do it? That's a big discussion in a future council season. We had just last week ago municipal election, so a new strategy is building now, so it'd be very exciting.
Yeah, well, I guess this is also common for Albin and Utrecht, housing crises and so on. So it's a very fine balance to strike. Okay. Heather, not sure if you have anything to ask here to our speakers, or you want to wrap up the session. And
I think thanks, Leon. I think actually this point on almost nature credits or compensation leads us perfectly into sharing some information about their next webinar. So maybe if we can just share the screen again, just because it's going to show up what's coming up next. I'm just going to also share the link in the chat box. So while we're just getting that presentation up with the final slide there, let me just say then that we have our next webinar coming up in about 2 weeks' time. So on Wednesday, the 7th of May, 10 till 12. And as I said, this discussion around compensation schemes actually perfectly leads into this, because our third webinar of the series is looking at building regulations for nature restoration. So we will have Sarah Hawes, Biodiversity Net Gain Officer, joining us from Bristol. Some of you have heard a bit about the Biodiversity Net Gain. We'll have some further information coming from Sarah in this webinar here. We'll have Mattia Leoni, Associate Professor in Architectural Technology and Environmental Design from the University of Naples, as well as Leah Gratas, Green Spaces and Environment Department from the City of Paris, looking a bit more at retrofitting buildings. So how can you green existing buildings and what is Paris doing there? So an exciting set of presenters. I shared the link there. That's where the registration will be available very soon. And we'll send out an email to all of the registered participants here as well, so you'll get the registration link there. But for now, I'll ask you just to save the date for this one and for the next one. So webinar 4, we're looking at regulations for nature restoration on municipal owned land specifically. And that's a week later on Wednesday, the 14th of May at 10 till 12. Okay, so that's it for me. I'll hand back over to you, Leon.
Great, thank you, Heather. And thanks to our speakers for their very interesting presentations. As far as I understand, they're open to receiving questions, so they've posted their details in the end of their slides, which we will share soon on our website. And you should have access to the recording online. There has been a request on something related to the ads. We will look into this. Yeah, looking forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Until then, you take back 5 minutes, and see you soon all. Thank you.